And we're back with Talking Law TV, and we're here with Doug Andrews. Hi, Doug.
Good to see you.
Good. You're here to tell us about tasers.
It's a fascinating subject.
It is, and our subtitle is, can you be zapped for merely not complying with their request?
That's true. Now, let me ask you this. Remember, we've talked about radar and LIDAR and
Right.
what those acronyms mean, where they came from? You know
Sure.
where taser came from?
I have no idea.
A guy named Jack Cover, a NASA scientist, created this device that gives electrical shock, basically, and he named it after his boyhood hero, Thomas A. Swift Electric Rifle, T-A-S-E-R.
Was this a British fellow?
No, he worked for NASA.
Really? Interesting.
So anyway, on we go.
So when were tasers first allowed to, for police to first carry them?
Well, it's had a history, but the invention started in, I think, 1971 or so, and has been in development since. And originally they were propelled by gunpowder, which made them a firearm by federal law. And in '94 they developed a better technique of basically like an air gun, that you would, same kind of cartridge you use in a paint gun or pellet pistol.
A little CO2.
So it's not classified as a firearm in most cases. Interestingly, it is defined as a firearm in one code section under Georgia law, and that's the code section that relates to if you commit a crime while you are in possession of a knife or a firearm. And they say for this code section, basically only, they include stun guns and tasers. So if you zap somebody to steal their wallet, you're going to get an additional consecutive 5 years. But that's the only place that a taser is defined as a firearm. Otherwise, it's not a firearm.
So the kind that you just have the little prongs on them and you touch somebody with it still counts?
And when I was a kid, we used that as a cattle prod. Yeah, but now they're stun guns, and you know these things give 20,000 or
well,
more
yeah,
volts.
You can buy them at the flea market for 20 bucks.
And the tasers are different than a stun gun. A stun gun, you make contact directly with the two prongs, and it's like sticking your fingers in an electrical socket. The taser fires, or is propelled by air, two darts connected by wire to the gun.
Yeah, we were going to show that, but that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, I was going to bring my taser and taser you, but I didn't want you flopping around like a fish on the set. The taser works by interrupting the electrical pulses in the body and basically disrupts your whole muscle system.
Well, can that cause some serious injuries or even kill somebody?
It has caused deaths. There's dispute like anything else in the civil justice arena as to whether the taser did it or some pre-existing condition, but I'm convinced that a taser can cause a heart attack or a stroke. I think the number is like since 1999, 274 people or thereabouts have been killed or died as a result after being tasered.
What if you had a pacemaker?
I think you're hurting. My suggestion is comply with the nice officer.
Well, what kind of training do they mandate for the officers in order to use them? Because I've seen on many shows when they talk about tasers, it seems like the person in the training also gets the privilege of being zapped.
Absolutely. The same with if somebody is going to be issued CS, they have to be first exposed to that gas. To carry a taser, part of the training program is that you will be tasered as a part of it. And I think they kind of crank down the voltage a little bit when they do that. I don't know for sure, but that'd be my suspicion. But there are differing voltages, and depending upon the strength of the battery in the thing. Rodney King, Los Angeles, 1991. Taser was used on him to not much effect. It didn't have any effect on him. They blamed that later on a weak battery. But officers are required to have training, and they are required to be tasered as a part of that training so they can experience. Compare that to the police officer who carries a pistol. He's not required to be shot to carry the pistol, so I'm not sure what the logic is there.
But yeah, well, one thing, at least, you know, given the choice, I'd rather be shocked than shot.
This is true. This is true.
Well, what about the effects of some drugs that you might have in your system, or if you're under the influence of like PCP or something, are you going to be less resistant to being tased?
I think that's a serious issue because PCP can just make somebody absolutely crazy and give them super strength, and that's the danger that any officer faces. Tasers are good because, generally speaking, it's non-lethal. There was a study done with 1,000 people, and they found by that study that it was 99.7% safe in the sense it didn't cause any lasting injuries. It is far better for an officer to have that option than to shoot somebody with a pistol. And the good officer will display it, warn the person. If they don't comply, they will be tasered, and most people today know what that means.
You would think, but there was a YouTube video that was popular before Christmas where this grandma was giving all kinds of grief to a guy, and he just tasered the, you know what, out of her.
You know there's no accounting for stupidity.
I mean, she just kept going and going and going, and I think she found out what Energizer really meant.
And then there was that student, I think, that was hauled out of an auditorium.
Bro?
Yeah, he was tasered. But the question he asked was, can you be tasered just for non-compliance? There was a case like that in a nearby county where the officer had stopped this guy for making an improper turn. It then devolved into a DUI investigation. The driver was offended because he claims he wasn't drinking at all. And the officer said, "Sir, put your hands on the hood." He says, "You get your supervisor here." The driver didn't offer any violence, didn't make any threats. He just said, "Get your supervisor here," about 6 times. And the officer said, "Sir, put your hands on the hood." And he pulled out his taser and said, "If you don't, I'm going to taser you." And the guy mistakenly said, "Do what you have to do." So he tasered him. Unfortunately, that guy had prior heart attack problems, but he survived. Is that a wrongful use of taser? Most standards of police departments is it's okay. It's non-lethal. If they fail to comply, you don't know when they will become violent or what their next step will be, so it's better for the officer to take that action, they say, than risk injury to the officer. So comply.
Is there a written criteria for when it's okay to use it?
Every department has their own use of force to include firearms and batons and everything else, so it varies by department. But the use of the taser generally is allowed as a next step up, and there should be some strong verbal warnings first. It shouldn't just be the first remedy of the officer.
Is there a procedure in place for what you do after you tase somebody? I mean, do you assist them or let them gather themselves?
Yeah, after the officer stops laughing at the person flopping around on the floor, they should retrieve the darts. They have barbs on them, so the officer has to remove it. And usually they do call EMTs to the scene to check the person out just for civil liability concerns. But if somebody thinks they've been tasered improperly and they shouldn't have, consult a lawyer. See if your rights have been violated, because they shouldn't be used willy-nilly. And if you do comply with the officer, there should be no taser. Now there are bad lawyers, bad judges. There are sometimes poor officers who are too trigger happy. But these tasers do cost money to use, so most officers, I think, are worried about money too for their department.
Are they disposable or one-shot deals, or you reload them, or how do
You
they work?
reload them with a cartridge.
So it's for one shot?
Well, some of them have multiple shots, but usually there's 2 in a cartridge. Some have 4, but generally you get at least 2 shots.
Okay, well, thank you, Doug. We'll be back with more Talking Law TV right after this.